Is the idea is to have an equitative balance in all the region. Without further ado, it is an honor for me to introduce to you Dr. Marta Gonzalez, a researcher from the Gran Colombia University, a PhD in law, a specialization in social security in Stargrad, the Universidad de Castilla-La Mancha, and she has worked at the CISS technical advisor of the employer sector of the international of the ILO since 1989, teacher, professor in her university, member from the Ibero-American Academy for Rights of the Worker, an international speaker, uh, author of several papers, and she has collaborated in more than 30 books with this subject matter. Thank you for collaborating with us. Thank you so much, Dr. Brandon, for your generous introduction. Good morning to the distinguished and selected audience that we have in the headquarters, as well as those that are here with us remotely. My uh, regards for having me here and for inviting my university, the Gran Colombia, and for giving me the opportunity to represent my country in this important conference. Thanks to the organizing committee as well as to all the technical committee, my sincere regards. Because we have some time constraints, I would like to focus on the content of my presentation. My presentation has an introduction, international standards of the ILO, the law for work harassment in Colombia, Agreement 190 in 2019, domestic violence, their causes, increasing concern, mental health, and conclusions. This is the table of contents for my presentation. It is really important to analyze the context in order to reach these conclusions because there's no effect without a cause. For me, it is a great commitment after listening to the great presentations that we have received during all this week. I will try to do the best I can. The great transformations in the labor world for different causes like globalization, internationalization of economies. This is not a new phenomenon. However, they demanded a lot of changes in work labor so they can be more flexible. Outsourcing has been satanized, but it has disregarded what does it mean regarding the improvement of procedures and services with high degree of specialization, as well as the economy, because they are working with volumes and it's eliminating the cost of error because they repeat operations. Market openness brought in um, a lot of competition that is not loyal in a brand new industry. And of course, Latin American people provided work and labor guarantees in face of the Asian markets. As a result, we saw a change of location of different corporations. Some of them have closed up with negative results. The economic crisis in 1930, the Asian tigers in 1987, and the financial crisis in the US in 2008. Out of all these crises, we learned few things, few experiences. The two worldwide, the 4.0 revolution, the disruptive era that was a quite challenge for the transformation in the means of work and the training to be adapted to those of them. Pandemic, the great surprise that was not foreseen for all of us, and we were obliged to stay at home to avoid infection, and this transformed our lives. And once again, wars between Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Palestine, and the threat for a nuclear world correspond to an overview of the things that has happened in almost a century that has shocked the world, but that it has meant undoubtedly huge challenges and great amounts of resilience. I don't want to be very negative, but we have to talk about all these facts that have marked the humanity with a history of changes. So we can state that today's world is different than the one that we had 70 years ago. We have had the privilege to accompany a lot of these changes that belong to our closest history, and it has great repercussions and very sensitive global transformations. International standards of the labor, the ILO, out of the 190 agreements adopted by the World Parliament of Labor, Right and Social Security, and this has been recognized currently. We have 10 fundamental agreements, and they were added to that to the 111 conference of 2003 with the agreement 152 and the recommendation 202. They were addressing different issues that have to do with social security matters. 82 of those agreements and one protocol are related with health care and health in the workplace. The organization was concerned about this. So in agreement 152 of 1952, they presented the minimum floors for social protection. It is important to notice the low rate of ratification of this agreement when they started by building their recommendation in the year 2011, that after the parliamentary agreement, it became the 202 of 2012, underlying the importance to have minimum floors for social protection. And we could think that the effects of that recommendation regarding the ratification of the agreement has represented a significant progress, but that's not the case. It increased only to 43 ratifications among state members due to the cost that this represents to all of them. It is not a secret that Social Security is highly costly, and the funding for its sustainability are the strongest challenges that we should face because they are linked to universality and the quality of services. Regarding Colombia, and because it is a guest country, I am going to emphasize on the Colombian situation. It is worthwhile to notice that we have 61 agreements that have been ratified and 52 agreements that are currently on duty. But regarding the process to include the social protection floors, I am not going to elaborate on that because yesterday Dr. Christian from the External University of Colombia, my dear colleague, gave a great presentation about that same subject matter. The only thing that I would like to add is how relevant are other instruments. Instrument 5. We call them the instruments of the 100-year celebration that were enacted on the year 2009. It is about the report that the high level commission, integrated by 9 experts from different nationalities, comprised, and that we know as social, universal social protection. This document has strengthened all these questions about if we need to talk about social protection, social security, if it's universal, if they are systems or not, or if it's really a valuable instrument that we should take into account because it's very relevant. So, as a parenthesis, in order to continue expressing that there are no studies outstanding to set for, as it should be, the causes for low ratification rates, starting from the basis that the coactive power of the ILO are not enough severe, and they have said that the ILO has no claw. Therefore, nothing happens to those state members that are not afraid to say that they are not willing to ratify this agreement. In the year 2023, there were millionaire figures that account for 3 million workers that are dying in work accidents. Out of them, according to the ILO, 2.6 of deaths are caused by diseases related with work and labor, and 330,000 for labor accidents, forgetting the constitutional factor of the production of richness and employment together with the capital that are the workers. These figures have promoted the attention and the development of standards for prevention and control that will result in the decrease of alarming figures. So they are constantly talking about how necessary is to adopt agreements that are going to rule this subject matter in order for the surveillance and control activities to be enacted. The act of labor harassment in Colombia. Why do I want to talk about that? Because we should say that this was the background for what a new agreement became in the year 2009 and 19, because we consider that there were no more need for agreements. Actions should be specific for reviewing and updating and reporting those that are not appropriate for the current moment. So they decide not to ratify existing agreements to learn about the causes for the lack of compliance of that commitment. The Piece of Act 210 in Colombia that prevents, corrects, and sanctions all acts that represent labor harassment in different modalities. Among them, we consider sexual harassment with high percentages and its variables. In the year 2021, in the Ministry of Labor, 2,227 cases was reported, because this is the administrative entity that is responsible for this. After addressing all these matters internally in the corporations before the corresponding units. Unfortunately, these cases are mainly against women. In other countries, we have other denominations for harassment, bullying, psychological violence, sexual harassment that unfortunately have women as a target and their condition as mother and provider for the family or single mothers should be silent before all these abuses that are generally um, done by their immediate boss. And another great difficulty regarding the test is the test and the evidence, because witnesses are not allowing or willing to speak out and they become silent witnesses. Today, with technology, these means of evidence contribute to verify those acts of labor harassment. So, as a result, they can be solved easily. Notwithstanding, with these all cases, they have exceeded the environment of work and they are occurring in educational places like primary schools. And this is a scourge. In many cases, we see that there is a lot of impunity, discrimination against women in all these cases of labor harassment has been quite evident. The reason to defend their job is something that the harassed woman has to defend. All these cases have a great impact in the mental health and in the occurrence of labor accidents, as we will see further on. Agreement 190 from 2019, or the agreement of the 100 years celebration. In this year, we started to discuss the report that will become an agreement that should coincide with the celebration of the 100 years in order to have a relevant instrument to celebrate this anniversary. We should highlight the insistence of not for not having more agreements, but to review the past one that have been adopted for more than 100 years and they need to be updated. This is a task that is happening now, and they are reporting all the agreements that have to be updated for the conference 112 that is going to be carried out pretty soon in June. 8 agreements will complete their endless process of report without, and sometimes it's so difficult to reach consensus on these international instruments that is worthwhile to remember that there were many sessions that were organized in order to define quote unquote violence in order to have the same meaning in the three official languages of the ILO. Those sessions were very long, and it took a lot of time for them to finally reach a definition. The issue of definition has been addressed for many times in different agreements, as well as the need to protect women from abuse and discrimination because it has an impact in the mental and physical health of the workers that have been affected by that. For Colombia, it was very nice to see that as a country, we were able to contribute for more than 10 years with this act for labor harassment. There is a global brigade that promotes the ratification of Agreement 190 by state members. On February 23 of this year, 2024, Colombia ratified an initiative to table this before the Congress. But with all the reforms that are being proposed by the current administration, the legislative capacity is overwhelmed. We know that Mexico ratified this agreement on July 6, 2022, and they have a 1 year term to design the appropriate pieces of act. Domestic violence causes an concerning increase. The characteristic of a society, quote unquote, machista, inherited from other cultures that had an influence in our idiosyncrasy, like the Spanish one, with 4 years, 4 centuries of Arabic domination, where women were submitted, were not enough recognized with rights and guarantees, was a legacy to our cultures. The fact that women in Colombia only till 1957 had the right to vote, with recognizing that they had citizens' capability to vote. But something even more interesting is the fact that they have to use the last name of the husband as if she belonged to him. But fortunately, this was eliminated on that same year. So these are just a sample of the consideration of women in Colombia. But now they have access to university schools and to studies, and that they can participate in the supply and demand of work. And agreements 152 and 111 of 1951, adopted by ILO, about equality of opportunities and salaries. We have to make sure that these are going to implement. And there are some laws of millimetries where they are obliged to have access to public works in a percentage of 30% for women. So in a photograph of the High Court, you can see that this is not being implemented. The fact that women can be considered only for home care, work that is not remunerated, and for raising children created a dependence on their husbands. And because she was not trained to work, uh, the family environment created this situation that they needed to support the violence and the bad treatment of their husband because she couldn't provide for her family. This situation was changing with the economic independence of women that oftentimes had uh, higher salaries than their husbands with the modern denomination. We cannot state that violence is generated only from husband to wife because it's now generalized towards children. And it's the response when they don't like any circumstance, and increasingly we see acts of higher violence and even cruelty. We have seen a lot of proliferation of cases in which an abused woman that has been tired of that abandoned her husband, and the man looks for her in order to uh, look for revenge of this case. And this chaotic situation coincides with the migration of people leaving their places of lockdown. So now societies are violent, intolerant, and seems to be that everything is going to be solved with um, punishments, and this hasn't happened overnight. It has been a process, and we should analyze all the causes in order to understand the situation and to look for some um, ways to solve this scourge. Among these causes, it's important to think back family as the cell of the society.
It is then worth questioning if families today are similar to families back 40 or 30 years ago. I'd say arguably not. We had important factors such as respect and discipline, concepts that have been reevaluated when we go against the full development of personality and freedom, and discipline goes against free will as well. Parents became mere providers without any supervision or control authority. It was conveyed to teachers who are not able to scold children with the risk of having repercussions to them. Adjusting to these society changes has been no easy task, and it hasn't been easy as well for the way families are made up. The increase of violence and intolerance wasn't gone with these society changes. It is considered the only way to solve conflicts, even though there is dialogue, agreements, and all the possible means to fight against conflict. Despite all of that, our society is still violent and lacks tolerance. We have seen that in some countries, violence has been rising with more intensity and even with unforeseen cruelty. Oftentimes, we see irrational conducts. Therefore, I would like to affirm that we are mentally ill. This is nothing far from the reality that has the causes we just mentioned, and we will deepen further down the line. In Colombia, as of October 2022, the Department of Legal Medicine highlighted 30,492 cases, commonly of partners among and followed by other family members against the elderly and children. And if I take a look at the figures in Mexico, the figures are really high considered the volume population. So, what are our societies doing to fight this intrafamily violence that has enormous cruelty features? Policing, isolating, hotlines, help desks, women protection groups for those who are victims of family violence. Sometimes these cases are not denounced mostly because there are repercussions. The effects of technology, with all its possibilities, exist. However, they haven't been properly executed. Violence is a day to day for children. They are exposed to situations where violence is the answer, with cruelty being shown way beyond what should be. The content sometimes should be along with adults, but it is not the case. We are living the consequences of lack of control. Even cartoons portray violence. The lack of education in the management of technology and the way we absorb it has a lot to do. And the effects of that mental disease that is extended on the population, the healthcare system, especially those who address mental health care, will be saturated soon. Violence is not a heritage of societies that are developing, such as my society. We hear from young children, even children, who kill their peers without any reason, just because they are repeating scenes copied from somewhere else. So, violence has this deep component of lack of education regarding the topic of control over the massive means of communication. Are we doing something to eradicate this violence that seems to be endless? We have state policies that control this mass media of communication. There are psychological risks and mental health. According to the definition of the mixed committee of the ILO and the WHO, and I quote, the psychosocial risks are the interactions between work, the environment, job satisfaction, and organization conditions by a means and the capabilities of the worker, their culture, their needs, and their personal situation outside of the work environment. End of quote. It is precisely with the institutionalization of the World Day for Social Security on April 28, 2016, where the ILO starts referring to the stress related by the work, which is determined by the ILO, the design of work and job relations. This happens when the demands of the work do not correspond or exceed the capabilities, resources, or abilities of the worker, or where the knowledge or the skills of the worker or a group are not enough to face the expectations of the company. When we talk about occupational health in Colombia, we talk about more than 100 years of story. Because in 1904, during the Rafael Reyes administration, the Public Health Department was created, talking about occupational health. Then we had more laws that developed on the topic. The 90 law of 1946, where the mandatory social security was created, and the Colombian Institute for Social Security, we have the protection of the insured in case of professional health or damage. In 1950, we have the National Institute of Health with a division of occupational health. With this law of 1970, we increased the specialization, and in 1979, we officially have a governing law on work health. These on three action areas: worker health, worker environment, and inspection, surveillance, and control, with the issuance of specific guidelines to create safety and to develop guidelines regarding the legal duty to create real occupational health programs. And then we see the creation of specialized companies. The 1562 law of 2012 created an occupational health program, and it works as the management system for safety and health on the workspace. However, situations due to the unforeseen situations such as COVID-19 transformed our habits, including the work habits. And there is no doubt that this can have an effect on mental health in our population, which is something that we have traced with figures that talk about this. The design of work, the relationship of the workers that is conveyed during the two publications of both international organizations changed. They went to improper spaces without the necessary elements. This was the situation for several people who developed all sorts of works and duties without the proper spaces or without any adaptation whatsoever, and it was not designed for working. This created a large burden of stress. We have different generations living together because the adults went back to their workplaces and the sick went back home. And this increased a lot the hardships for mental health, which were stressed out. Some, of course, had more favorable conditions, but they were on total isolation because they lived alone. They weren't able to go outside and they were dependent on services that are provided at home. It was a trauma generating event. So, as conclusions, I bring the following. The permanent re- coexistence of different generations and the circumstances and behavior accelerated the processes of fatigue and insatisfaction were transformed into pathologies that were not detected or readily served. And facing this lack of attention, they were increasing and became crises at several points in time. Not only stress, damages to health, muscle and bone disease due to lack of ergonomic places, overeating due to boredom and fatigue, overweight that overweight that happened due to the lack of exercise due to the constraints at home, insatisfaction as people feel that they were stripped out of their lives. Depression, anxiety were things that came out during the pandemic and still come out as a consequence thereof. And if we add to this list of consequences, when we go back to the quote unquote normality, we'll see loss of work positions and conditions that created more stress on the families and the circumstances regarding politics, economics, and society that several of our countries experience. All of this created an increase in domestic violence, cases of suicide, and an increase on mental pathologies. This created an overburden for health systems. The climate of uncertainty in which our countries are immersed due to political and social situations, the constant thinking about the future, the loss of employment or close of economic activities as a thought is increasing an alarming rate, and it affects the mental health of our peoples. It is another burden, yet again, for our health systems. Thus, we immediately need psychological help for families, especially for the young ones facing lack of opportunities. We see them really disoriented. The situation is not easy, and we need to act decisively to face the situation. With the arrival of technology and the professions that were going to disappear, we saw psychology on the list, and we believe this is being reevaluated due to the effects on mental health. And we oftentimes see that it is necessary to have a family psychologist or a psychological counsel. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Apart from this, you provided a context on the international policy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As part of this week, we have a special moment for COVID-19 learning lessons, but I believe you have another focus that we must consider, and it provided richness to your intervention. We have a couple questions for you, and we will ask them one by one so you can develop further down. You mentioned a couple of them, but I don't know if you wish to go deeper into this. First one we have on social media is facing the big challenges in the work sphere. How must the health on the labor space must be modified to protect the workers on increasingly demanding spaces? Thank you very much for the question. I would like to stress out that these large changes bring along several demands. Although the figures are really concerning regarding the job loss, I believe we must manifest that we have seen new employments being created, and there are more to come because technology is fully blooming. So the question is, what will happen with this development of new job positions? We need to analyze them from the occupational point of view, and we need to establish what are the environmental, physical, and all other risks that surround those new job positions that are just being created. We will need to modify these systems, adapting the protection to the new employments. Changes are still happening, modifications are still happening. We are constantly changing. And in all of this, education has a great impact. That's why we insist time and again for the university sector and universities, we need to innovate for these new professions. And it goes hand in hand to be on the lookout to see what are the risks from the health and work perspective. An example of this development is the lack of connection that we saw first in Spain, and it has been extending to our countries. The disconnection for us, it meant like something wasn't blocked, but this need for disconnection meant that we were hours on end facing devices of different species. So I really do not believe a lot in that, in this disconnection. And this is simple. Even if the employer has all the means to unplug the system, we are experiencing an addiction to devices. We cannot eat, we cannot speak, we cannot be in a meeting without our devices right next to us. We are not really being disconnected. So we need to see those new risks. We need to see the protective measures and we need to make them efficient. And that's what we are not doing. We are not enforcing the right to disconnection that helps to create a buffer against this whip of mental health conditions. Thank you. It is really complicated.
Another question. Before the increasing concern about domestic violence, how the public and private sectors can contribute to prevent this problem in a comprehensive manner from the work environment? Thank you so much for this interesting question. In a nutshell, state policies, and there is a lack of them. However, once again, I would like to mention something very relevant: education. We should give a lot of priority to educate. And once again, what happened with family? Family used to be the cell, the foundation of the society. If there's a culture of respecting individuals, respecting family relationships, personal relationships in the work environment, in the educational environment, everything would be different. But unfortunately, there's no even citizens education in Colombia. Unfortunately, we used to have uh, a subject matter at school that was civic education. We learn about citizens' right, respect to citizens, but seems to be that uh, that subject matter was old and they decided to remove that from the curricula. However, it's very necessary to go back to those uh, rights, to those duties as citizens, to learn to live and to co-live together. And when I'm talking about community, I'm referring to all the environments where we have to be part of. That would be the best education. We need to go back to those principles, to learn about those good costumes, to respect others and to treat them with dignity. I think that that is enough, and that is much better than enacting pieces of law. Thank you so much. So much. If you allow us, we have another question. What are the challenges and opportunities that you have identified by implementing Agreement 190 in the case of Colombia and in the case of the Mexican ratification? What can we do in order to have a proper implementation and to maximize its benefits? Well, with all due respect, I cannot speak out about the Mexican situation because what I know is that they have ratified it on July 6, 2022. However, I don't know anything about the secondary acts or the regulations that were enacted for that agreement 190. Well, I think that anything that has to do with violence and harassment are not new subject matters at all. All the legislations a long time have been addressing thoroughly or um, in the surface clear pieces of fact. I am talking about the case of Colombia when they designed 10 years, more than 10 years ago, in the year 2006, this piece of law, the Act for Harassment in Jobs. So challenges have not only to do with designing law. I insist once again in education. The foundation is education, creating a real culture that, like a magnet, are going to stick up to the human being so they can become their behavioral standards. In the case of Colombia, we are known as the country of the law, the country of laws, because we have different laws, different flavors, different colors of laws for all the tastes. But what happens? They are ineffective. Then, therefore, the challenge is to make them effective. So these standards and laws can be effective. And this is not done through sanctioning or punishing them. And I insist 1,000 times more. Education. I do believe in transforming society towards a society that is going to be better because society has lost its direction. And that's the main challenge, the real challenge. Opportunities, we have plenty of opportunities. As much as we look backwards and we learn from good experiences and we extract from them all the positive things that were experienced in the past, that would be great because we are prone to disregard the good things that happened in the past because we consider them old or irrelevant. They belong to the past. I think that we need to recover the past, to rescue the past, because there are good costumes. There were good costumes to respect others and to have a good discipline because what we are living now, it's chaos as a result of the indiscipline because everyone can do whatever they want and they don't um, abide standards or rules. So these are the challenges and the opportunities that we have before us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doctor. And before wrapping up with this panel, on behalf of General Secretary, we would like to hand you over a token of our appreciation, a book celebrating 100 years of Social Security. To you and to all the participants in the headquarters, we would like to thank you, and this is a token of our appreciation, a great gift that I am going to uh, take to the library of my university. Mr. Alcantara, please. Mr. Kuhn, you are going to receive the same book, but in English. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us all this week. On behalf all the member institutions, we would like to thank you for being with us in the headquarters of the CISS. But before wrapping up with this panel, Dr. Cardona has the floor. I would like to invite all the panelists here and all the participants in the social media to join us celebrating the International Day of Health in the Workplace. I think that today's presentation suits perfectly to give us food for thought. As a conference, we would like to thank you and to invite you to your participation on Maine because we're going to be talking about new risk in the workplace. The chair of the Commission for Professional Risk and Work asked us to remind you that today we are celebrating this day and we would like to invite you on how to face all these challenges that have to do with mental health, but other challenges that we face in different labor environments. Brandon, you have the floor again.
Thank you very much, Doctor. So, with this, we will close the first cycle of advancements regarding Social Security, where we had the participation of the four member universities. And this would be a quick break. We will be back at noon with the forum organized by the elderly organization of the continent for a dignified elder age. Thank you very much. See you in a bit.
para seguridad social.
Asistencia médica. Hoy llegamos muy temprano al hospital. Mi hermana tiene varios días con dolor de oído y por eso vinimos a ver al médico. Ahí está sentada en la sala de espera. Se ve achicopalada, como dice mi mamá. No sé si es por el dolor o porque tiene sueño, como yo.
Tres para seguridad social.
Desempleo. A mi hermana la despidieron hace poco. Ella dice que fue injusto. Ahora recibe una ayuda mientras consigue un nuevo empleo. Es un dinero que le sirve para moverse y cubrir algunos gastos. Yo la miro cuando se prepara para salir. Le digo que así de bonitos seguros consigue un trabajo en un lugar muy elegante. Ella me mira y se ríe antes de salir con su carpeta en la mano.
Tres para seguridad social. Migrantes. Nosotros no somos de aquí, llegamos caminando de muy lejos, pero eso fue cuando yo todavía era una niña. Los domingos vendemos fruta en el mercado. Cuando no hay mucha gente, mi mamá atiende a mi hermano que llora y pide comida a cada rato. Yo ayudo a pesar y a dar el vuelto. La gente casi siempre me sonríe. Tres para seguridad social.
Prestaciones de invalidez. El abuelo de Sofía siempre habla como si estuviera gritando. Sofía dice que ya no escucha, porque cuando estaba joven trabajaba en una fábrica donde había mucho ruido. Desde hace tiempo está incapacitado, pero igual está ocupado todo el tiempo reparando cosas que la gente le lleva. Es como si tuviera magia en las manos.
para Seguridad Social. Prestaciones por maternidad. Por la ventana veo llegar a la señora Regina. Camina despacio y a veces se agarra de las paredes. Tiene una panza enorme porque está a punto de tener un bebé. A veces yo la ayudo con las bolsas y ella me agradece con la mirada. Hace días que no va al trabajo. Tiene licencia de maternidad y cuida a su bebé, que es lo más importante ahora. Un, dos, tres para Seguridad Social.
Prestaciones de sobrevivientes. La abuela Carmen viene todas las tardes a cuidarnos mientras mamá trabaja. A nosotros nos gusta porque nos cuenta historias de cuando era pequeña. Desde que el abuelo murió, ella recibe una pensión. Por eso puede estar con nosotros y consentirnos. Además de historias, de vez en cuando nos trae dulces y cosas ricas para merendar.
para Seguridad Social.
Prestaciones en caso de accidente de trabajo y de enfermedad profesional. El celular sonó justo a la hora del almuerzo. Llamaron para decir que mi papá había sufrido un accidente en el trabajo. Aún recuerdo ese día. Todos estábamos asustados porque nos imaginamos muchas cosas. Ahora, cada vez que lo veo sentado en la sala con la mirada perdida, siento que está triste. No sé si porque le toca guardar reposo o porque debe esperar mucho tiempo para empezar a caminar de nuevo.
Bosques para Seguridad Social.
Prestaciones familiares. En mi barrio hay muchas familias grandes, como la mía. Somos 4 hermanos y viene un bebé en camino. Mi papá dice que donde comen 2, comen 3 y donde comen 6, comen 7, porque estamos esperando que el bebé nazca pronto. Por fortuna, ahora va a recibir una ayuda para los gastos que se avecinan. Como dicen, tener un hijo es tener una bendición.
2, 3 para seguridad social.
Prestaciones por vejez. Mi abuelo sale por las tardes a la plaza. Ahí se ve con sus amigos. Don Julio, que trabajaba con él en la misma empresa, y otros señores que se reúnen para hablar bajo la sombra de los árboles. Casi siempre hablan de sus pensiones. El día que la cobran es el más feliz de todos.
Un, 2, 3 para seguridad social.
Cuando un niño o una niña, un adolescente, un adulto o una persona mayor está enfermo, tiene derecho a que el Estado le garantice asistencia médica. Y si por alguna razón una persona no puede trabajar, debe recibir un ingreso para poder mantener a su familia, hasta que pueda encontrar un nuevo empleo. Todas las personas mayores tienen derecho a una pensión y las madres a un apoyo por maternidad. Los beneficios que contribuyen para que exista protección para las personas a lo largo de toda su vida es lo que se llama seguridad social. La seguridad social es un derecho humano, contribuye con el bienestar colectivo y proporciona medidas para la inclusión. De este modo, se garantizan sociedades más justas.
Un, 2, 3 para seguridad social.
Todos contribuimos. En un país, todas las personas que realizan un trabajo formal o informal contribuyen con la seguridad social, que es una manera de ayudar al bien común. Las personas que ayudan en las tareas de la casa, los ancianos, los niños y aquellos que tienen alguna discapacidad aportan de muchas maneras a la seguridad social. Todos participamos para que una comunidad sea próspera. La ayuda que damos para distribuirnos las cargas son formas de crecer juntos.
Un, 2, 3 para seguridad social.
Trabajadores del campo. La señora Lupe vende empanadas en la esquina de mi casa. Todas las mañanas está ahí, al lado de su cesta. Siempre dice lo mismo. ¡Empanadas! ¡Empanadas! Como si cantara.
Antes trabajaba como jornalera. Nos dijo un día que mi papá le preguntó, pero se vino porque allá es muy difícil y ella ya tiene su edad. Lo veo en sus manos cada vez que le compramos. Un, dos, tres para seguridad social.
Asistencia médica. Hoy llegamos muy temprano al hospital. Mi hermana tiene varios días con dolor de oído y por eso vinimos a ver al médico. Ahí está sentada en la sala de espera. Se ve achicopalada, como dice mi mamá. No sé si es por el dolor o porque tiene sueño, como yo.
Un, dos, tres para seguridad social.
Desempleo. A mi hermana la despidieron hace poco. Ella dice que fue injusto. Ahora recibe una ayuda. Consigue un nuevo empleo. Es un dinero que le sirve para moverse y cubrir algunos gastos. Yo la miro cuando se prepara para salir. Le digo que así de bonitos seguros.
2, 3 para seguridad social.
Asistencia médica. Hoy llegamos muy temprano al hospital. Mi hermana tiene varios días con dolor de oído y por eso vinimos a ver al médico. Ahí está sentada en la sala de espera. Se ve achicopalada, como dice mi mamá. No sé si es por el dolor o porque tiene sueño, como yo.
Para seguridad social.
Desempleo. A mi hermana la despidieron hace poco. Ella dice que fue injusto. Ahora recibe una ayuda mientras consigue un nuevo empleo. Es un dinero que le sirve para moverse y cubrir algunos gastos. Yo la miro cuando se prepara para salir. Le digo que así de bonitos seguros consigue un trabajo en un lugar muy elegante. Ella me mira y se ríe antes de salir con su carpeta en la mano.
Para seguridad social. Migrantes. Nosotros no somos de aquí, llegamos caminando de muy lejos, pero eso fue cuando yo todavía era una niña. Los domingos vendemos fruta en el mercado. Cuando no hay mucha gente, mi mamá atiende a mi hermano que llora y pide comida a cada rato. Yo ayudo a pesar y a dar el vuelto. La gente casi siempre me sonríe. Para seguridad social.
Prestaciones de invalidez. El abuelo de Sofía siempre habla como si estuviera gritando. Sofía dice que ya no escucha, porque cuando estaba joven trabajaba en una fábrica donde había mucho ruido. Desde hace tiempo está incapacitado, pero igual está ocupado todo el tiempo reparando cosas que la gente le lleva. Es como si tuviera magia en las manos.
Prestaciones por maternidad. Por la ventana veo llegar a la señora Regina. Camina despacio y a veces se agarra de las paredes. Tiene una panza enorme porque está a punto de tener un bebé. A veces yo la ayudo con las bolsas y ella me agradece con la mirada. Hace días que no va al trabajo. Tiene licencia de maternidad y cuida a su bebé, que es lo más importante ahora. Para seguridad social.
Prestaciones de sobrevivientes. La abuela Carmen viene todas las tardes a cuidarnos mientras mamá trabaja. A nosotros nos gusta porque nos cuenta historias de cuando era pequeña. Desde que el abuelo murió, ella recibe una pensión. Por eso puede estar con nosotros y consentirnos. Además de historias, de vez en cuando nos trae dulces y cosas ricas para merendar.
Para seguridad social.
Prestaciones en caso de accidente de trabajo y de enfermedad profesional. El celular sonó justo a la hora del almuerzo. Llamaron para decir que mi papá había sufrido un accidente en el trabajo. Aún recuerdo ese día. Todos estábamos asustados porque nos imaginamos muchas cosas. Ahora, cada vez que lo veo sentado en la sala con la mirada perdida, siento que está triste. No sé si porque le toca guardar reposo o porque debe esperar mucho tiempo para empezar a caminar de nuevo.
Para seguridad social.
Prestaciones familiares. En mi barrio hay muchas familias grandes, como la mía. Somos 4 hermanos y viene un bebé en camino. Mi papá dice que donde comen 2, comen 3 y donde comen 6, comen 7, porque estamos esperando que el bebé nazca pronto. Por fortuna, ahora va a recibir una ayuda para los gastos que se avecinan. Como dicen, tener un hijo es tener una bendición.
Una muy buen inicio de media tarde a quienes nos acompañan el día de hoy, a quienes han estado con esta conferencia en las diferentes actividades de la Semana de la Seguridad Social en este 2024. En nombre de nuestro secretario general, el maestro Álvaro Velarca
On behalf
Hernández,
of Pilar Hernandez, we extend our most warm of the greetings and we thank you for being here with us
junto al seguimiento ante estas
to
actividades,
stay with us in these activities and provide us with a follow-up. I would like to
Enrique Moyo, director general
say
ejecutivo de
thank you to
Oportunidades
Dr.
Sociales
Ruben
de la
Jorge
Seguridad
Moyo,
Social,
who's the representative
oportunidades del
of the
Estado
long-term
Bolivariano,
social security of the plurinominal state of Bolivia, also Mr.
oportunidades para el
Humbert
florecimiento de la
Fleming,
organización social
knowledge combinator of
y
Socio,
Europeo para la
UE
Seguridad Social, el
Initiative
cual
for Social
nos han
Security
estado
and
acompañando de
Work,
manera
who have
presencial
been
en la
here with
sede
us on the headquarters of CISS.
También quiero saludar
And I
especialmente al
would
señor
like
Jorge
to
Del
send my
Ángelo,
regards to Jorge Del
presidente de
Angel,
la Asociación
honorary chair
Agentes
of
de
the
Organismos de la Tercera Edad
Mutual
y quien es
Association of
integrante de la Comisión
Entities for
Interamericana de
Elderly
Adultos
People
Mayores,
and
a
chair
quien le
of the
agradecemos
Inter-American Commission for Elderly
su
People.
presencia el día de
Thank
hoy.
you
Su
for being here.
liderazgo, señor
Thank you for
presidente de
your
esta comisión,
leadership,
y a
Mr. De
nosotros
Angelo,
los
in this
parlamentarios
commission, and the
y los
commitment that
participantes
you
que
have
celebramos
and
hoy.
engagement that you have
Quiero
with this
saludar
commission for the works that we carried out.
participantes
My
que nos
regards to all the
acompañan
experts that are
como
here with
señor
us.
Simón
Mr.
Cecchini,
Simon
que
Ceccheni
habla
from
en
the
nombre de
Economic
nuestra
Commission for
comisión,
Latin America and the
a
Caribbean,
la maestra Mónica Ibarra y al señor Juan
Mrs.
Carlos
Mónica Ibarra,
Pauliches,
Mr. Juan
coordinadores y
Carlos
personas
Pauliches,
expertas del equipo de
advisors and experts from the
AMAOT
AMAOTE
desde
team,
Argentina,
two
a la
people
maestra
from
Treviño
Argentina,
Saucedo,
Mr.
directora interna
Treviño
de
Saucedo, in domestic or internal
maestro
audit of the
Francisco
conference,
Enrique Pérez
Mr.
Solano,
Francisco
director
Enrique
de
Pérez
Seguridad
from
y
the
Protección Social
Institute
del
of
Estado de
Security and
México,
Social Services for the Workers of the
Estados
State.
de México, nos acompaña
They are here with us in
la
Mexico.
maestra María del Carmen Troche
Mrs.
del
Maria
Banco
del
de
Carmen
Previsión
Troche
Social
from
en
the
Uruguay
Bank of
y al
Social
señor
Provision in Uruguay,
Alberto
Dr.
Hernández,
Alberto Ernesto
vicepresidente
Fernandez from the Ministry of Public Health in
quien nos
Cuba.
acompaña desde esta
Uh,
maravillosa isla.
he is with
En
us
estos días hemos
from
trabajado y tenido diversos
remotely.
temas
In
a
this
los
week, we
que
have addressed
ha
different
dedicado toda atención
subject matters
y siempre
that
les
are
invito
very
a participar
interesting
en la
for
seguridad
all
social.
the stakeholders that
Hemos
work in the
reconocido los
social security
esfuerzos
arena. We have
y
talked about
capacidades con
climate change, funds for investments, and we
que
have seen the education
una
in
reflexión
this
sobre
subject
cómo
matter, the
la
floors for
organización
social protection, and other scenarios that have to do with social security.
conclusión
Today, we are going
lo
to
que nuestras
talk about
sociedades deben
what
considerar cuando tenemos
our
población
society should consider when
cambios
we have
generacionales que
older
cada
aging
día nos obligan a cambiar las miradas sobre
individuals.
los
We
procesos de
need
la
to
salud.
have a different approach regarding processes and disease. And they oblige us to think about the economical, social, communal, and familiar changes that we need to take into account when we have longer um, generations. We need to identify different alternatives to be considered. I wish you the best of success and a great discussion. I am going to give the floor to Mr. Jorge De Angelo, who will introduce this panel. Trends, challenges for an elderly society. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, according to where you are now. Before starting with my presentation, I would like to convey to the participants of the uh, main table my regards. Mr. Álvaro Velarca, Chair of the CISS, thank you for all your support. And together with all the General Secretary staff support, because this uh, meeting wouldn't be possible without them. So the Inter-American Commission for the Elderly has been working since last year together with the experts of the General Secretariat to develop this discussion, this conversation that is broken down in two phases. In the first phase, we are going to have an expert that is going to give us a general overlook about the situation of populations aging in Latin America and all over the world. And a second part that is going to be a conversation with different experts as another way, as a closer way to address this issue and to answer a host of questions that we propose as a ruling idea to carry out this discussion for all the participants. And of course, as Luz mentioned, this is under the framework of the celebration of the social week. It is an honor for us to participate here. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Simón Chine, Director of CELADE, the Population Coordination for Latin America, and he has great experience in demographic change, international migration, aging, and policies for social protection, poverty reduction, and reduction of inequality. He had a dissertation about the census of population Italy 1991. Mr. Sarchin has a master in international economic from the Washington University, George Washington University, and an MBA from the Catholic University in Chile. Thank you for being with us. And you have the floor, Mr. Simón Chine. Thank you so much, D'Angelo. My regards to all the participants, Dr. Cardona. My regards for to the CISS for inviting me here to be able to share with you during this Social Security Week. I am going to give you an overview based on a report that we prepared in the CEPAL about aging and the rights for elderly people in Latin America and the Caribbean. Because in the CLAC, with the international secretary, we have a meeting every 5 years. And in the last meeting was carried out in Santiago at the end of the year 2022. Today the conference is chaired by the Chilean government. I would like to share with the countries an overlook about aging. So I prepared this report that it's a follow-up the international instrument and international agreement that was enacted in the year 2002, the International Action Plan of Madrid for Aging in the framework of the United Nations that is proposing a very radical perspective of change, inviting us to consider aging and elderly people as a contribution to society. And they give us the possibility to build a society for all the ages with a glance of ages where all the participants can take place, not only considering aging as a problem or a challenge, but also as an opportunity. We would like to celebrate all the accomplishments that we have had. This report was prepared with official information, but also with other reports. And we would like to highlight that among the public policies, there have been some progresses because now we have rules, regulations, programs, strategies, and laws. Pandemic had a great impact in all of us, but mainly elderly people, both for mortality and for isolation, and their mental health was affected. And of course, their lifestyle was limited. This is a demographic overview. This is the long term curve from 1950 to 21,000 for elderly people. In the red line, you can see the information for Latin America and the Caribbean. In 1950, as region, we had 5% of the population that was elderly. Currently, 14% of the population, almost 95 million people, are elderly people. And this is within the global average. So, if we go to the long term, to the 2100 year, we will see that 38% accounts for elderly people. So, we are going to be in the same level as Europe. In this long term of 150 years, we started by looking like Africa, but now we look like Europe. So this is not only an issue of long term, but in only 96 years, we are going to have much elderly people in our societies. And behind that, we have a decrease in fertility. That's in explaining the increase in the population. But another important indicator that besides the pandemic as a trend, we need to celebrate this. The life expectancies for both genders have increased. In 1950, one average individual in Latin America had a life expectancy of 49 years old. During the pandemic, we reached 75 years old. But unfortunately, the pandemic affected the Latin American, the Caribbean region of more than other regions in the world, and we had a decrease. But we have recovered that. In the year 2024, we are expecting to have a life expectancy of 76 years old, and for the year 2050, it would reach to 80 years old. So we need to celebrate this because I think that a great indicator, life expectancy is growing. In our region, life expectancy was low in comparison with more advanced countries in the region. Another issue that we need to highlight to understand aging is that we have another phenomena, aging of old ages. What does this mean? That within this large group of 60 years older, the age group that grows higher is the one of 80 years old or older in the red line. So we used to be less than 10%, but now we are more than 20% in this age group. So this group is going to be growing even more together with the age group of 75 years old. And this has strong implication for public policies because the more years of life we have, we are going to have more elderly people. And then we have to consider different issues that have to do with dependence. And now regarding the structure of our demography, if in 1950 we could spoke about the population pyramid because the largest age group was children and it was narrowing down as ages increased. But currently the foundation, the basis of the pyramid is comprised with the age a group age of 20 to 25 years old. But you see now that the pyramid has inverted, but the most important age group are for young people. But by the year 2100, the base of the pyramids is going to be the age group of 65 years old. So I am showing you the the changes in demographic that we have had and that we are going to have. Currently, in America Latina, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a population of young adults. Till the year 2021, the largest group was 0 to 19 years old. This changed. And now the most important age group is 20 to 39 years old, but this is going to change. And by the year 2050, the age group of 60 years old and older is going to be the age group that is going to become the most important one. And then we can speak about an aging society, an old society by then. So we need to plan for the mid and long term regarding healthcare, education, pensions, and so forth. So the region as a whole is considered that like that. But you know that countries have a different stage of demographic transition. The small dots that you see to the left are countries that we classified within different groups of demographic transition. To the left, in the upper part, in a red point, you see Haiti, that is in an early stage for demographic transition because they still have a low percentage of elderly population and 3 children per woman. That's the ratio. And in green, you see a small dot, Cuba, where we have a high percentage of elderly people, more than 20%, and in average, 1.5 children are born for women. Another way to consider these differences between aging and birthing, we need to see in which group age group is we have more population from 0 to 16 years. In Cuba, that already happened, in Cuba, Chile, in different years. And this is going to happen in all the countries. From an early demographic transition, this is going to increase. But let's talk about the different environments where aging is going to have an impact. Social protection, as you know, great differences to access according to who is requesting access. This coverage by contributions or without contributions is like that. So these are data from the year 2020 in the red line, in the green line, till the year 2019. A population older than 65 years old has a coverage of 74% coverage of social protection, but a 54% for contribution pensions. And it is important to mention these differences. And we also see that there is a difference by gender, by areas. And when we put together the contributions and those that are not contributives, because we know that the no contributions are present in 25% of the countries, and this has helped us to narrow down the gap of coverage for women that were not part of the labor market or they were living in rural areas. And of course, there is a gap of coverage for those countries that we have been able to estimate the impact of the pensions during the year 2020. It was clear the pensions mitigated an increase of 35.5% of poverty and 23% of extreme poverty in elderly people. So we see that this is a fundamental instrument. especially vis-a-vis a 73% of coverage, great difference among countries. Mexico is within the regional average. They have a better coverage. Contribution, non-contributions, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Uruguay, and others in Central America, for example, El Salvador, the Caribbean and Dominican Republic that have low coverage. And there are countries where they have 0.4% of the population that is covered. However, we cannot speak about coverage only. When we speak about pensions, we need to think about coverage and the lack of sufficiency, if the amount that they receive allows them to have a decent life. In that sense, this indicator that it's called percentage of population that receives pensions that are not enough or that don't receive a pension, or if they receive that is lower than the poverty line. Well, 40% of elderly people older than 60 years old receive a pension that is not enough, with large difference among countries in Central America, Honduras, Salvador. It's very high. And also countries that have a high coverage, like Bolivia, have high degrees of insufficiency because these pensions are of no contribution with low amounts. So it's a low percentage like Brazil, Chile, and Uruguay. In During the peak of the pandemic, fortunately, they were doing some things. The countries were reporting to us all the strategies, the money transfer and activities that they did. So here you can see that there was a real increase of the social expenditure, as you can see on the right, the two bars for the sub-regions in Latin America and the Caribbean between the year 2019 and 2020, the social expenditure for the governments in Latin America increased from 4.2 up to 5.9%. And they made some adjustment. In the year 2021, it went down to 5.3%, but it was even higher than the year 2019. It was a necessary action to face this great crisis. Well, I already spoke about pensions, but it's important to talk about jobs, work. The message that ECLAC conveys is that for elderly people that are still active in the job market, that should be an option, desirable if that is what you want to do, but not an obligation if you want to receive your retirement fund. Unfortunately, we notice that there is a very strong correlation between the occupation rate of men and elderly women with the lack of sufficiency of the pension in those countries that have a higher insufficiency of pensions. You see higher rates of occupation between men and women. So elderly people should remain in the work market besides their will. And all older people that are still in the work market, unfortunately, there is a lot of edadism or definition by age. And this is one of the main challenges that elderly people face in the working environment. Edadism, prejudgment. And during the pandemic, some countries mentioned that elderly people could not go out of home and a host of inequities. And now, before the general problem, not only considering the pandemic, but also edadism, some countries have made constitutions amendment to enhance this relationship. Countries like Chile remove the criteria of age to enter into a training program. But you know that when an older people is looking for a job, oftentimes is complicated, not because they don't have the capabilities to work, but for discrimination. Another aspect that we consider for analyzing aging and challenges for older people, the issue of inclusion in the digital world. There, we notice the difference per age in the access, the use of internet, computer, and of course, as ages increases, they have less access. And among people that are using technologies, if we break down by ages, older people haven't been able to use all the technologies fully. They don't make use of e-commerce and things like that. So this is an issue that we always uh, consider. We need to make the technology platforms very inclusive. We need to provide training opportunities for older people so they can take part of the digital world as well. Another great issue linked to the pensions in the framework of social protection is healthcare. Countries are reporting the activities for prevention, primary attention, primary care, more complexity and specialized works, rehab. Um, so, in the national report about aging, they say that older people till the pandemic notice an enhancement in their life condition and in the health conditions. And this goes hand in hand with another indicator, the increase in the life expectancy, because despite all the problems that we have in our healthcare systems, we have seen some improvements. But the base of the report among countries and territories, and well, a great challenge that all the countries are mentioning is the issue of non-infectious diseases. Unfortunately, we see an increase in non-infectious diseases that for older people are the main cause of death, followed by infection disease and accidents. This is a graph for breaking down different age groups. What are the causes and which are the age groups with uh, handicap or disabilities. Diabetes is one of the first diseases, and Alzheimer in older ages. So this information, these epidemiological trends are key to see what are the actions that we need to implement to improve the health of the elderly people. Another important issue has to do with the environment in which elderly people live, their participation, their self-sufficiency. And this results in specific policies, urban policies, housing policies, access to housing for elderly people, sanitary policies. Some of them are universal policies, infrastructure, technology, but others, the countries have possibility to have specific policies to give access to housing for elderly people uh, and to adapt it for their specific conditions of health, to enhance public spaces, to adapt urban furniture, make cities easy to live for elderly people. because then it's going to be easy for everyone to live in those cities. Transportation, public transportation, and another important matter, justice. It's important to recognize the right of access that elderly people have. Another issue that is not as innovative as it used to be, but we need to work on it because we still have long way to go, is the issue of care. Aging, the more we age, the functional dependency rate increases, and then the need for care increases. During the pandemic, we realized how key is that. In the ECLAP, we mentioned that we needed to promote a society of cares. Because up to now, you can see that in the slide, you see a lot of activities of non monetary remuneration activities carried out by women. That is much higher than men. And that's why are talking about a society of care with co-responsibility between men and women and receiving support from the state. So that's why we are talking about designing a comprehensive care system. Because when we talk about care, usually everything falls down on the responsibility of women and older women that are in charge of the care activities. But two important issues regarding care are long-term care and palliative care. Long-term care is for those that need someone that is going to support them for transportation, for cleaning activities. For it is very costly, very overwhelming, and it has become an issue of public policies, and we need to discuss that. It is estimated that by 2050%, the total, all the population is going to have some time, some kind of, would need some time of care. And of course, serious care to um, provide care in serious illnesses. We need to provide supportive care in the hospital, outside the hospitals. You see the figures. There are countries like Uruguay that have advanced a little bit more. The rate for supportive care is higher, but in many other countries, the levels are very low to provide supportive care. So the great message of this report is that we need to move forward by in designing more policies for care. There is a Santiago statement or the Declaration of Santiago that focus on the issue of care, inviting us to move forward with designing more policies for care, to strengthen the information sources, and to provide training and skills for care. And finally, I think I am running out of time. Some conclusions. Aging is something that needs to be addressed so they can become part of the governmental agendas. We have noticed the demographic information, that it's enough information to support the fact that we need more support from the Constitution, from other agencies and entities. They need to be a priority in the legal framework. And the message is that we need to make this a universal issue for public policy, social protection, health, and care. But also we need to consider other environments in which elderly people needs to receive support, education about the life cycle, to narrow down the digital gap, and to classify or to eliminate discrimination by age in the labor market. And of course, we need more information. We need to break down this for different conditions, diseases, morbidity, ages, discapacity, and things like that. And finally, everything has to be done with the participation of elderly people. When we are developing public policies, we need to have a shared responsibility because that's the way we are going to design better policies. So, without further ado, I would like to thank you for your attention and sorry for taking more of my time. Thank you. Thanks to you, doctor. This presentation was very informative and you didn't took a lot of additional time, so don't worry about that. We thank you for your presentation. With this presentation, you are presenting to us the great challenges that we face in the future regarding aging. And this is food for thought, right? But now we are going to start with the second part of this panel. We are going to talk about what can we do before this reality. And now I am going to introduce the leader for this conversation, Mrs. Monica Ibarra. She has an MBA in psychology, and some studies in family development. Mrs. Ibarra is an expert in designing and management healthcare systems for elderly people from the Pan American Health Organization. She has a master's degree in elderly studies, and currently she is the head of the social communitary department of the social services of the PAMI, and she is in charge of developing health policies for elderly people and its socio-economic relationship with other territories. She is the academic coordinator of AMATE. My regards, and you have the floor, Monica. Jorge, thank you so much. My regards to all the participants. For me, it is an honor to be here and to share this panel from experts from Uruguay, Argentina, Cuba, Chile, Mexico, and I am going to introduce them. In this dialogue, we have from Argentina, Mr. Juan Carlos Paluche, great experience, and he has worked in different positions. He was the Secretary of Social Security in the Ministry of Labor, Employment, and Social Security of the Argentina nation. He was also the chair of the Fund for Family Subsidy of Services, and Mr. Pauliche has been professor of the Ibero-American Center for Social Security Studies in Mexico City since the year 2008. This institution put his name to one of the main classrooms of the institution in Mexico City. Mr. Paulucci was awarded Dr. Guillermo Calavero, the greatest award provided by the Pan American Association about Justice. The award Mariano Moreno, granted by others from Buenos Aires, the award Currinom Time for the work that he has done for citizens culture for the Whirling Party in Buenos Aires. With us in Mexico, Minister Leticia Felicidad Treviño Saucedo. She has an MBA in public accounting by the Autonomous University of Zacatecas and a master's degree in management with a specialty in finance from the Autonomous Technological Institute. She has a PhD in interdisciplinary research by the Autonomous University in Mexico, together with the Autonomous University of the State of Colladura. Currently, she is an auditor, an internal Audit of the Autonomous University of Mexico. She is professor of the Mexican Academy of the Right for Social Security. In Mexico, also, Professor Enrique Pérez Hernández from Villahermosa, Tabasco, MBA in Legal Studies and a public accountant by the Universidad Valle de México. Since the year 2004, he has had different positions in the state and federal jurisdiction. He was the director of benefits in the Fund of Provision of the Auxiliary Police in Mexico, the regional manager of telecommunications in Mexico, and currently he is under director of social and cultural services of the Institute of Social Services for State Workers. With us, we also have Maria del Carmen Droche, MBA in Social Work by the University of the Republic of Uruguay, Social Service Studies by the Alcalá University and OIS in Spain. Since the year 1991, she has been working in the sector of social service of the Social Provision Bank in the area of aging of the social programs. Currently, she is the manager of the unit of social benefits, designing and implementing the technical guidelines to act in the social programs in the national environment by monitoring and managing local programs that have to do with organized civil society and managing solutions for elderly people. Now, from Cuba, we have Dr. Alberto Ernesto Fernandez. He is an expert, first degree of comprehensive general medicine, master in social gerontology by the Autonomous University of Madrid. He has a specialization in management for elderly people by the OPS and the WHO, and a diploma in Gerontology for Public Administration, member of the Cuban Association of General Medicine and the Cuban Society of Geriatrics in Cuba. Since the year 1996, he is responsible of the program for the elderly people in the province of Salud in La Habana. Since the year 2006, he is the head of the National Department for the Elderly People, Social Assistance, and Mental Health of the Ministry of Public Health in Cuba. He is still working in that unit. We would like to thank all of you for being here with us today. And in this conversation, we are going to have 3 different blocks. In every block, 3 people can participate for 2 minutes. I am going to be giving you the times in order to have a very dynamic conversation. And then we will have some time for feedback. After the first round, we are going to have another question where we remind all the participants about the dialogue round. So let's get started with this work that is going to be very productive, and it's going to enable participation and a collective production that is very interesting. Let's start with the first question. Which approaches are available for analyzing longevity? And I am going to give the floor to those experts that would like to participate. And I am going to give you the floor as you raise your hand. Please remember that you have only 2 minutes. And hopefully, we can have an exchange among all of us. Who would like to start? Dr. Paolucci, you have the floor. Thank you so much. The subject matter that we are addressing now is part of the large arena of social security. We need to include this within the social security regime. We need to understand that this is the activity, to say so, that protects men before uh, having birth and till death. Because there is a plan, the mother child plan that is going to protect the child, and another plan for protecting you when you are dead. So the pensions plan. So the subject matter that we are addressing today is within this wide field of social security. And we have to highlight this because we need to take into account that if benefits provided by social security are enough to protect the older people during his or her life. And at the same time, we need to ask if the benefits that they are receiving before becoming an old people during their young times, if they are enough in order to prevent problems that they can have in the future, as they have mentioned before me. So, in that sense, I think that it's relevant to consider the retirement and pension systems that has to do a lot with this, as well as the regime to preserve the health of elderly people, to protect it, taking into account different economic situations for elderly people, as well as difficulties that exist in the society and that we notice almost every day, because the elderly people has to be listened to. We need to take into account the opinion of elderly people if it's appropriate. Thank you so much, and my regards to you. Very interesting. We need to consider social security, the prevention of problems, and to analyze thoroughly the pension system. Dr. Leticia would like to have the floor. You have the floor now, Doctor. Dr. Leticia. Well, longevity is a hallmark in humanity, as Dr. Cicchini explained, how increasingly age is growing and the percentage of population aging is growing. With this, we need to analyze with different disciplines and with a system approach this situation. And this is just my opinion. Longevity and aging is a whole that has to take into account together with lifestyle, and aging starts the moment we are born, and it's a process during all of our life. And um, older ages is just a stage. And now we consider that when you are around 65, 70 years old, you are older. Based on this, we need to say that when we talk about aging, older ages, and life quality implies different dimensions, the biological, the psychological, and the social one. In the social dimension, we need to include the economic component as well as the political and the cultural one. On the other hand, if we want to develop indicators of well-being and life quality, we need to have a comprehensive approach about older age and aging. Therefore, we need to address this in an interdisciplinary matter, taking into account social, mental, and physical health of the human being. So, getting old with health to adapt to changing situations of life depends on the prevention of risk that human being is exposed during aging stages, and prevention of some risk is the purpose of the social and protection and social security services that exist in the world. I had an experience during my research in PhD. I carried out interviews with people of 30 and 60 years old in Mexico. Is that few of them are aware of the fact that they can have some risk. So I ask about their older ages.
And people that were 55, 57, so elder age, like something that's far, far away. And also, the situation of pensions in Mexico has been modified, and there have been surveys that are 25 years old, and people are still concerned about their old age when they are really close to the age where they reach that stage, which is the elder age. So I would like to stress out the intersystemic interdisciplinary focus. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, doctora
Thank
Leticia.
you very much, Dr.
Muy
Leticia.
claro el recorrido y realmente ha pisado por
It is a great tour,
esos
and
soportes fundamentales
it has gone
en la
through those
práctica de la
fundamental
educación.
supports.
Doctor Francisco
Now we will hear
Guerra,
Dr. Francisco, who just raised his hand. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you very much. It is such a pleasure to meet again on this such important stage. I believe the analysis is really deep and substantial. On the approach, I would like to mention the longevity as an achievement of society. It is an achievement of modern society that has a challenge for the economic, social, and emotional development of the elderly. Secondly, the longevity and quality of life, living more time. It is crucial to allow to emphasize better improvements so that we have a better living condition for the elderly. Thirdly, solidarity between generations. That is, the support of the generations that are younger towards the elder and vice versa. Another approach would be the diversity in aging. This is important because the elderly, during their aging process, can have all sorts of variations. That's why it is important to take this into account. Now, I would like to talk about what are the spaces that we have on my institution called ISTE. What are the approaches that we are doing? And I would like to take part of this analysis. For instance, we have CEAM, the Center of Studies for the Elderly, which promotes the comprehensive gerontologic approach to the right holders that are 60 or older to have social learning research purposes, and they need to have a full exercise of their rights and to go along their different areas of life with success. We also raise awareness on the society on valuing and respecting the elderly. This is also a center that's responsible of promoting the comprehensive development of the elder. I believe that we have two approaches or two ways. First one, the promotion of a culture of aging in those who are working for the state in our country. And the second way is the comprehensive development of the elderly. To avoid abusing of your time, I would just like to close by saying something that I believe is worth highlighting. This Center of Studies and Support to the Elderly just got an important certification by the Social Security International Organization in 2020. This was due to the prize of best practices of AIS, and we performed a good practice to promote active aging among the users of this institution, which is the ISTE. So we carried out this proposal and we were awarded with this recognition of good practices, which is something that we feel really proud about. So that's my participation. Thank you very much.
No, gracias a usted, Francisco. Y cómo no,
Thank you very
recibir
much.
un premio en relación a
And
esta etapa
congratulations on your
integrada de la
award for
población
that
que se presenta.
enormous
Bueno,
task that you have
nos
in
queda
front of you.
con
Now
la mano alzada la
we
licenciada María
have
del Carmen, la licenciada María del Carmen, la
Maria
escuchamos.
del Carmen. Please, we can hear you. Maria del Carmen Torch. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for your invitation and for sharing this conversation that is held between so many institutions and experts that support and bring to the table several reflections on aging and old age. I will tell you about the services that the organization I represent provides. This translates to analyzing, diagnosing a population, such as Uruguay's, with a large percentage of elder people. So we started devising different public policy, which in turn translated into different programs that complemented the public services that the population received. I will mention a couple items and I will listen for the rest. And I believe it's like you have a wire that conduces to the growth. And that's how I feel for Latin America. We have these opportunities for exchange and this mutual support through research, through discussions, through queries. And we have previously heard by Mr. Enrique that aging and life expectancy is a result of the hard work that we have implemented so that people live longer and better. I will mention some courses of actions that we have within the provisions, social provision bank, like raising awareness on the population regarding old age, try to integrate into society the elderly, promote volunteership as part of the activities done by institutions, for instance, in the long term establishments which are housing for the elderly. If they didn't exist, then the state would have another cost. That's why we call them strategic partners of the state. Strengthen the organized civil society through that kind of actions to community. Foster the self-management of these types of institutions so that they have enough maturity to be independent from other help that may be necessary. And also providing with dignified housing for those who need it the most. And within the programs that I will tell you, if you are interested in one specific, maybe we can go back from it to it in due time. We have a housing program. We have a strengthening of the social of the organized society. We have a program that helps to the digital inclusion of the elderly, among others. And for us, this has a transversal axis, which is achieving a greater participation in society of the elderly. We need to apply new paradigms because we have envisioned a new maturity in aging and a new change without less attention in the services rendered, but focusing on the person, focusing the person and the services that we probably comply with. Institutions, the elderly who are the persons who are aging see it. We see that we are more focused on the person. What do they want as a person during their aging stage? Dignify aging, making them protagonists of their decisions, to have an active voice in their process, and that they are listened to so we can provide the necessary public policy. This leads us to discuss the challenges that we have in front of us. I believe analyzing this as a complementary service is an outlook that we need to ask for the social security organizations. I believe this is not a solution for only social services, as social security implemented is not the end all be all. Thank you. That's my contribution. Thank you for this synthesis and this concept of maturity of organizations from the civil society. It is a term that is new, and it is one of the problems that we are trying to deal with on these interchanges. It is truly interesting, your comment. Dr. Paolucci now raised his hand. The floor is yours. Yes, to directly address the topic, well, I don't want to be exhibited like a show off, but we need to think what are the concrete measures that we need to make to have the result that we are all waiting, which is the extension of life, of course, but in the case of the senior citizen, we have a productive life for him and for society. I believe that in this regard, we need to work in different aspects. And one of them is the policies that have been developed across different areas. And I would like to focus right now on education. We need to take out of the activity, it seems like we need to take out from that activity persons who are from an age. Now we have people that are younger than they needed. They work for less than what is justified to earn retirement, when in most cases they are in the best condition to teach their knowledge. I believe this is also a reality in the general labor conditions when they ask for the elderly. The intelligence of the vacancies will be covered by someone external. That is the thought that companies have, and that is not true. The computational progress makes it so that vacancies are not fulfilled by a new person. What happens is that the existing people make up for the gap in vacancy. So the stories we have, the pretenses that we have for retirement are no longer valid in this moment in the huge majority of cases. I believe this is also related with the undervalue we have for experience. There was an author of the 19th century who was a politician and a philosopher that says there is no two historic moments alike, and this is the same for the individual. Naturally, there are no two cases exactly the same, but on most circumstances, what I'm saying holds true. I believe experience is useful, and I believe this is a topic that must be considered. And we need to consider this to generate a culture around this. I believe that a university professor, such as the ones I've had across my years, really have conveyed not only experience but knowledge and ways to obtain said knowledge that are superior and that have not been rendered invalid. On the contrary, I believe that something different. We have something. One thing is someone who's not in condition on their right minds, and someone differently is someone who is in their full capability and can and impedes the younger generations to take from the source of culture. I believe both cases harm the younger generations because it prevents having experienced teachers, knowledgeable teachers, and people who are proven in their area of expertise. I believe this is something that must be considered in society. I also talk about legal measures because currently we have pretty much the obligation of retiring those who have complied with a given age. And I believe this is not the best way for a society. I believe it is the worst. On the other hand, I believe that the retirement regime must be enough to provide enough money to the retiree, and that is when I mean enough money to have a dignified livelihood. We have examples from Latin America and Europe. I do not adhere to copying exactly what is done in other countries, but I believe that in other countries there are true centers for the elderly where they live in individual houses and they are provided with attention services that they need, sometimes on a daily basis. And I believe this is a great improvement on the living quality. Yes, I will interrupt you because there is another specialist that raised their hand. Oh, I'm sorry. No, on the contrary, we were brought to the second question that is related to this crossroads we are currently at. What are the actions that we can assume that we can integrate, taking into account that several of the elderly that are still active in productive stages have labor conditions which are not ideal. So let's continue with, I believe it is Mr. Alberto who just raised their hands. Is that you, Alberto? Yes. Thank you for being with us. We hear you. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, greetings, Monica, and greetings, everyone. We've had the opportunity to be there several times. We also have Dr. Medina, who is also a specialist on the senior citizen, so that we have opportunities to gain knowledge. In agreement. I am fully in agreement with the intervention of the professor. And in the experience of Cuba, that is a highly uh, old country, 60% of the population is over 60, and the birth rate has plummeted from the 70s. We don't have a single daughter per woman since the 70s. We have an accelerated aging process where in a couple of years we have a fully inverted pyramid because the brother part is our generation, the ones who are 60. I would like to tell you that we have several principles on how we perceive aging. Aging is not a disease. It doesn't mean that when you age, you will gain more problems. And I had a professor of geriatrics who said, aging is a triumph, it is a challenge, it is a crisis. All of those at the same time. With these demographics that we see in Cuba, which Latin America will see in years to come, the elderly have a crucial role in society. We need the elderly. We protect them from the Constitution. In Article 4, it says free development of the personality during old age, possibility of deciding even in old age the continuity of projects, even the work being provided with work in partnership during and marrying someone. In 2010, we were discussing in Cuba that we had both populations, the one that's reaching 14 years with those of 60, were the same. And now we have only 60 years old. It's the only population that's increasing. That's why the participation of the elderly is so important in Cuba. We have laws that says that retirement is not mandatory. Our professors in the medicine schools are indispensable. It would be catastrophic if they retired because it is so important for us. We have other laws that we have for professors in elementary school and junior high school that come back after retirement as a professor and they receive both sums, the retirement and their wage as a worker. Those are beautiful experiences. We have people that are 80 years old in front of a classroom. We also stimulate longer work for for the for the workers. After 25 years of work, they will be able to retire with 90% of their wage. And something that's also new in Cuba, our grandparents or fathers retired, and now there is a law that is the maternity leave for grandparents. We help our daughters to come back to work, and we adhere to this license to care for our grandchild or children, and then we can come back to work. That is new. And we have a good outlook with the attention of the elderly as an important part of society. Just as other countries, we have the same challenges of taking care of them. As we heard previously, we have an elderly, a double aging. We are not only raising 60 years and above, but we are 75 years and above. And our system can be shared then in that regard. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alberto. Now we are on the second question, which is in relation to this productivity issue and also the precarization. What do you have, Dr. Leticia, for us? Regarding the second question on what actions can be done for the attention of the elderly, I would like to say that even if we have a life expectancy increase, it is not a healthy increase in life expectancy. This translates into a chronic disease with age and an expansion of functional dependence, which generates a need of healthcare and more use of public or private health services. This, in turn, can lead to out of pocket expenses for those who have a reduction in their income. Therefore, the challenge of the public health systems is to provide enough services to care for the elderly. Otherwise, the out of pocket costs are increased and the pensions of the social protection fu- funds are not sufficient, and this impacts the quality of life and the impoverishment of the population as a whole. It is also relevant to have a preemption aspect for societies and people alike, just as Mr. Cecchini was stating. The population that needs the protection and social security systems will increase given the rise in life expectancy and the reduction in fertility. Those in charge of demographics establish or state 2.1 children per women to replace a population, and we were shown figures where lots of countries are below. We are barely on 2.1, and it depends on across the country. Here in Mexico City, who have 1.8 children per woman. The more industrialized the cities are, the less the birth rate is. And in Mexico City, the average age is 35 years of age. This increase of the elderly population requires pensions and healthcare services, needs more funds. And here we have the debates. Do we need tax reforms? Do we need the increase of provisions to Social Security? That is something I would like to put on the table. We need to see how to finance the protection programs and Social Security programs with this constant rise that I am really surprised on the figure that by 2100 in Latin America, we will have 38% of the population being old. And in relation to the persons, I would like to state how important is savings for their retirement and old age. With COVID, there were retirements to the pension funds, which is allowed each 5 years if there is unemployment. Analyzing the figures, we have a constant in the retirement of money. This implies less accumulation, and in the case of Mexico, we reduce the time that's quoted for Social Security. I believe there is more information in population to tell them how to give back that money back to the manager institutions. Sorry to interrupt. To avoid exceeding time, Francisco, you just raise your hand. We hear you. And with this intervention, we will close the interchange of the second question to go to the third question. Thank you so much. I will adhere to my time allotted. During the intervention of the elderly, I will be clear and precise. For this attention, here in ISTE, we have two spheres that are part of the provisions that we have within our legal framework. That is the ISTE law. Firstly, within the seven personal provisions that we have for our right holders, we have personal loans as one of them. And within those seven, we have a special fund for those who are retired. They can use the other six, regardless of they are taking the first one. One is called day houses. In this space, we have the objective to have workshops not only as an occupational activity, but also, if the pensionees decide so, they can offer to the market the services or products, and that adds to their economic welfare. In some cases, they have handcrafts where some of the population have performed lamps, portraits, and other crafts that they sell, and they generate an additional income. That is one of the objectives or the activities that we have on the day houses. And I will tell more about this later down the line. And I would also like to tell you that in our country, the political constitution of the Mexican United States, in its constitution, we see a pension for the elderly as of 65 years. This is about 6,000 Mexican pesos. This is by law, regardless of pensions through ISTE. This does not impede that they receive the pension that the estates provide to them. So they can have two pensions. I believe that's a good economic boost for our elder in Mexico. Thank you. Truly interesting perspective, Francisco. Thank you for this tour to review the value of productivity of the elderly, regardless of the space and their relationship to health. Thank you very much for your participation so far. We see productivity, the economic crossroads, and the protagonism of the elderly is the access to have a holistic, comprehensive, interdisciplinary way to be assertive in our interventions. The life cycle takes us to think about biological, emotional, psychosocial changes. There's a close in the labor cycle, but not a close in productivity. There is a lack of family, lack of partners, friends. All of these circumstances promote situations where we want to avoid isolation and solitude. And the physical changes of these limitations and these impossibilities to act with the world generate a huge obstacle to access to these people who try to continue their lives and they find barriers. In this context, I would like you to think about what are the actions for the community, social, and family interaction of the elderly? Are there scenarios that are fostered or scenarios that are not visibilized enough? Or is there a community? How do you see ageism? Do you deal with prejudice through aging and ageism and blocks the way to interaction? We have three interventions to have more dynamic participations. Please raise your hands. And it is truly enriching and dynamic, everything that you just have mentioned. Leticia, you have the floor. Nobody likes aging, but nobody likes to die young, which are the two alternatives that we have. Apart from improving public policy on social protection for health and pensions, it is important to modify the individual habits and incorporate the planning of the aging process, which must begin in the youth regarding health prevention and also in savings. We need to increase the economic funding for the old age. We need to strengthen the social bonds to have an active aging and to generate a self care culture from the youth to improve life quality during old age and reduce the medical expenses. This is all translated into economic autonomy and in turn a larger intervention of the elderly with their surroundings. For a comprehensive integration of the elderly, we need the help of several sectors, highlighting the learning sector. We need to build solutions for these new challenges that we see thanks to this rise in life expectancy that the population has experienced as of late. That is my opinion and participation. Thank you. We have this need to retake not only the economics capital, but also the human capital that goes hand in hand to be integrated. Maria del Carmen, we hear you. Thank you. I believe that following the comments of Leticia, I believe that through time we have built an aging that goes according to the changes and situations that we experienced in time. We were talking about a model that's focused on the people and also about timelines and strategic lines in programs. I believe all of this entailed the creation of an aging that reduced the costs and the risks in health. We talk about active aging, others talk about satisfactory or beneficial aging. But it all has the aim of reaching old age with optimal autonomy and keep providing to society. Without their participation, we strengthen that participation through activities and action that we can have along with them. I believe we go through a good way. The pandemic broke us down socially, economically, and emotionally as well. But as all crises, we need to see that it was an opportunity because after analyzing it, we saw that we believe we had a safe route, but we hadn't had challenges such as mental health in the elderly into account and solitude. We worked it in that line of the culture of aging. But the pandemic showed us that we had gaps that we thought were properly fulfilled, or we were trying to complement it. But now we see it is a challenge to overcome, especially what we heard about education. We've tried to build the aging because we have experienced lots of years trying to educate to age. This aging process is not only given because we provide training and socialize through the organization. I believe this must be part of the teaching. I believe aging must be more than a biological fact. It needs to be accompanied by this reflection that we are just discussing in this moment. For instance, the negative image, throw away this relationship between age and disease and having active aging. Something I would like to mention is the reform on Social Security, which was brought into law just last year. And this includes an area of active aging within the plans and Social Security. The person can retire, but they can still be included in work that's remunerated. For me, that was a really important achievement, just as the extension of the retirement age. We have had progress, and of course, there's ways to go, but I believe that during this decade, we can say, okay, are we missing out? Yes. Have we done something? Yes. Is this a singular thing or a collective thing? It is a collective thing. I will reach old age and I am learning how to age and I want to know what do I want from my old age. And if from the social services and other techniques we work from that standpoint, we believe we are on the good route. And if we take challenges as an opportunity to continue growing while we age, then I believe that we can be satisfied. Well, not satisfied, but maybe good, at ease with this. The largest challenge we need to have is this generational gap between aging. We need to have with the young a perspective to tell them where are they heading. And if we go with them, we need to visualize this to increase other benefits. It is truly interesting, especially because there are lots of concepts that are really consistent that we don't want to leave behind to reach a final conclusion. I believe this is brilliant. Now we hear Alberto from Cuba. Can you hear you? Or is it your partner who will have your comment? It is a challenge, really, as we noted at the beginning. First of all, today we are talking about populational aging. There are values, but we talk about populational aging, which is a challenge for societies. And of course, a person that's 60, 70 years of age has nothing to do with someone who was 60 or 70 years 30 years ago. In the past, we were talking as teenagers as a problem. Now, the problem is the elders. Those are persons who are working, who do sports. It is not your classic fairy tale grandma who's just sitting down knitting. And this is thanks to the healthcare systems. For instance, today, The process, if you reach 60 years old, you have health access, you have good nutrition, and thus you reach old age in really different conditions. And they are still part of society. We were previously saying they don't have to retire. But once they retire, what do they do? According to the Cuban needs, we need to treat the demographic dynamics due to low natality. And for all of that, each ministry has their duties to address the situation. Say, education. What's the superior health ministry? How do you see this? All ministries need to intervene to address these demographic dynamics. Just to give you an example, in Cuba, we have 17% of migration, both internal and external. And we have the participation of the elderly in communities. They are part of the community. And we try to avoid having isolated elderly people. And during the pandemics, we saw how to protect their elderly within the communities. But back to the 80s, we were stimulating the elderly to incorporate into the grandpa circles so that the elderly within their communities go outside, participate in cinemas or parks, and do activities that are recreational all days. More important than exercise is socialization, or as we say, sometimes we believe we are rulers or dictators of the elderly, but they have a time, a moment in time where they socialize. We have the elderly houses, the elderly culture houses. We need to do as much as possible so that they believe and they feel they are part of society because it is just another stage of age. Even the, there's residences for the elderly, and we want to have them being part of society. That is the right of the elderly. Thank you very much. Before giving time to the next intervention, and because we are running out of time, and to make a dynamic, let's remember that we have 2 minutes. This way, if there is a question in the auditorium, we can address them and finish on time. Francisco, we hear you. Thank you. I know time is of the essence. Within our activities in ISTE, I will mention two out of the many I wanted to mention. The first one, I want to talk about the day houses. Here we generate different activities of recreational nature to find the individual value as active people so that they can perform occupational activities. They have a dignified activity, and we foster the coexistence between them with all sorts of activities, educational, sports, also prevention on mental and physical health, so that apart from enjoying and learning, they share their arts skills. These spaces also have professionals that are in charge of supporting their activities for a healthier livelihood. We have strengthening practices, we have exercises to strengthen the mind through different artistic expressions. There are places that are right even for people with disabilities so that they can develop. In these day houses, we have medical support, gerontologic support, physiotherapy, social work in most of them, nutrition and psychology. This is the first one. And I want to quickly tell you that it is worth highlighting that they houses were certified with cum laude by the Social Security International Organization in 2023. This was a good practices proposal, and we contributed with this and were awarded with this certification. But on the second, we have the Convive Center, which is a center that's kind of like a hotel that we have in Mexico City. Here we receive on a weekly basis 4 states, and the activities imply staying in this hotel. We generate social, cultural events, and we foresee programmed and scheduled visits to museums, to the theater, and to Ixte Huixla, which is a swimming pool park that's located on the state of Morelos. And here we have the elderly performing visits. This is the comment that we have, and I would like to have a final reflection regarding this third question. In ISTE, we wish for the current elderly people and the future elderly people, we wish and we say that we have the legacy and the proof of a life well lived, and we expect that we have a full chapter of of knowledge and love. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francisco. Now, Dr. Pavlici, the floor is yours. And with this, we will have the last intervention from you to close this third block for the third question to go to the questions of the public. Thank you. Members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen, who invited us to this meeting, I would like to tell you that in my judgment, there is a really antipathic measure that we need to take into account. And I will say it bluntly. I believe it is antipathic to raise the age of retirement, but this is a must. The provisional regime is in crisis worldwide because evidently we have a huge resistance of society, especially in European countries, where they resist raising the minimum retirement age. Disregarding the advantages of the elderly. But it turns out that now a 60-year-old woman is not an elder, a senior citizen. It is not someone who's unable to work. It is ripe for work, actually. Just as the general age, the minimum general age to access retirement, and it's the same. Clearly, the retirement law is in crisis, and this is due to this circumstance that I am signaling. There is no concrete possibility to raise the contributions that the retirement regime feeds upon in our country. That is the system that we all know about. This is key, and it will help the senior citizen to continue working without the need of these pressures. This is universal, and we need to continue working at an old age. This will lead to discussion, of course, but If we have the opportunity, we can gladly discuss this with figures. Thank you for listening to us and the favor of your attention, and I am at your disposition. Thank you, Dr. Paolucci. We take note of your interest and we may foster your encounter to dynamize with figures, with data, with projections, and with proposals, of course. Next, I will read to you a question of our audience. So, Mr. Cecchini, could you broaden on the information that's regarding the elderly and the access to technology? How are you progressing in this regard? What's the data? What's the orientation that you can provide? And how do you value this progress on this 4.0 revolution that we are just starting with? Can you please put us into context? Thank you, of course. The 4.0 revolution, the new technologies, is something that's really important for us. We all need to learn from this, and we know that sometimes the elderly struggle a little bit more than others because it is not like they were born with a cell phone in hand, and that's completely different from learning how to do that. Regarding the data, generally speaking, we have a specific survey. I don't know if there's data that's as detailed, but we are currently doing a census, and other countries are asking about the access and the use of technology. And of course, this allows to have a deep dive on age. I believe that even if we don't have lots of information, we will have a measurement on this regard. On the public policy topic, I believe that oftentimes the programs or the trainings that are being done are on NGOs or local governments. More than a broad system-wide policy, I am still waiting for the comments of the other panel members. Maybe we had an important program from another country. Thank you. Thank you. It is a topic where we joined force, where we met halfway on the pandemic. We need to deepen on the effect because the sensibility of everyone is in place. We need to increase the operational capability and to learn about the use of systems, of languages, and the huge challenge that is still an opportunity in our lifespan and in the projection of the course of life. Dr. Paolucci, we hear your comment. There's a course that we are doing from the Association of Computation for the Elderly to facilitate the elderly to perform the exercise and the access to get them to know what is commonly known as the 4.0 revolution. This is not a revolution. It is just enabling them so that they can know how to use the instruments, the tools. And this is a game changer for people, especially for the elderly. They feel good. This is not a finished course that I cannot offer to you because we need to evaluate the results at the end of the course. But I believe this can be reproduced in several areas and we can get their conclusions and we can exchange conclusions to avoid mistakes made to being repeated. So this is the commitment I take to tell you what are the results of this. Thank you very much, doctor. Now I will gather some keywords. Maria del Carmen, 1 minute, please. Simply, I would go back to the program IPITA that goes to the elderly and it uses digital inclusion. We have workshops to have a better use of apps. The app brings all activities closer to the elderly across the territory. I believe that was a really important experience. It was really useful as a program during the pandemic. We distribute devices. In the beginning, we were using tablets, but when we listened to the elderly, they preferred cell phones. There's a great satisfaction by the users. It goes through all the elderly. And the last collective that was part of this program was the pensions to the old age. This is not a contributive scheme. I believe we contemplate equity and we are on the right track to reach digital equality, and this help in handling devices for all the population. It's everything. Thank you, Maria del Carmen. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you very much. Just on behalf of our director, Dr. Berta Alcalde Lupan, and the provider of services, I would like to thank you to this conference. Thank you for this invitation to be part of this discussion. Thank you very much. And please receive our greeting, Mr. Álvaro Velarca Hernandez, also Jorge de Angelo, President of the Commission, the American Commission for the Elderly. Thank you to our moderator, Mónica Ibarra, also Dr. Palucci from Argentina, also Ms. Leticia Felicidad Treviño Saucedo, María del Carmen Roche from Uruguay, and Mr. Alberto Hernandez from Cuba, and our friend Mr. Luz Ángela Cardón, our coordinator in this commission. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be with you and dialogue in such a significant and important topic, which is longevity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Francisco. We join your salutes and we extend them, so we replicate your thanking us. There are 2 or 3 keywords that I will use to talk about the protagonism of each person and how they build their active, productive, and healthy old age. I want to make a calling so that the organizations intercede so that we can work from an interdisciplinary perspective in a comprehensive, integrated, and holistic point of view. And we want to walk along with the public policy that cannot provide for everything. I believe that the monetary economy is one point, but the economy of the energy, of the social expenditure, is the productivity that we want to sustain during a healthy lifespan without poverty or disease, but with a desire to remain active and productive in the society. Thank you for inviting me as a moderator. Thank you, Mr. Succini, for that wonderful exposition that you provided and this wonderful data that updated us. And now I will give the floor to Jorge De Angelo, who is the president of the Commission, to close this act. Thank you. This has been a really successful moment. Both Francisco, Monica spared me from greeting everyone. Thank you very much, and I salute every single one of you. Also, I thank you because by doing so, now I can reflect, which is during the longest time in Kadam, the motto was that we get to the old age as we live in the same way. And I believe that all of our efforts must be directed to teaching on social security and healthcare, especially on the elderly. When they reach the old age, they need to see how to prevent accidents through architecture. I won't go into depth into that, but I also listen something that's really relevant to what I believe Maria del Carmen said it. We build our old age, and I relate this to this Kadam motto. But I dissent in something, especially with the feeling that the pandemic broke us. In many, yes, but not in the emotion, because if there is an emotion that's key to go ahead is passion. And I see this in every single one of you. So we have lots of things. We have endured lots of things that are beyond ourselves, but we still have this flame within us to keep on working in benefit of the elderly so that they can receive benefits and services that are up to their level, and they can live a happy life and they can become part of a happy society. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Alvaro Velarca. And on the next one, we will force them somehow to be part of this. He's always supporting us, and he's a source of inspiration. Thank you to his team. Here we have Luz, who's been working importantly in this creation of the conversation space. So with no further ado, thank you very much, and this is the end of this session. Thank you very much to every single one of you, and good luck in your progress. Thank you very much to our members of the panel. It is important to have your participation in this conference. It is really important to listen from you wherever you are and to have an exchange and reflect on the implications of our experiences. At the end of the day, this is what brings sense to these activities. Thank you for accepting this challenge and invitation. On behalf of Maestro Alvaro Velarca Hernandez and of the full teams that took part in the creation, conception, publication, transmission, and communication, I would like to thank you, especially to all of the members. Thank you to the partners who are with us on the headquarters. On Monday, this conference will continue with the activities of what we should have called the month of the social security. We have an agenda that will continue on Monday with some master classes on disability and social security. Also with a wonderful panel on what you were saying. What are the lessons learned from the pandemic and what can we understand, learn, and build from this sanitary crisis that caught us with our guards down? Thank you to our audience on Zoom and through different platforms. This is an activity for you. Without this, without you, this wouldn't be void of. This would be void of sense. This is the end of the activity of today and this week of Social Security 2024. Thank you very much.